Notre Dame had to come back not once, but twice in the second half to beat the Penn State Nittany Lions and move on to the national championship. How the Irish got it done, plus more post-game reaction is coming right up on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and it is so great to have you here on Friday, January 10th, to talk about Notre Dame's win over Penn State in the college football playoff. I'm releasing this during the evening, so if this wasn't your first listen of the day, I will let it slide just this once, but I hope you tuned in to the live post-game reaction show last night or this morning as your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, this is your reminder to please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Wow. What a game. Notre Dame's win over Penn State in the Orange Bowl was an instant classic, and it's one that we are going to be talking about for the rest of our lives. That's not hyperbolic at all. That was truly one of the greatest wins I have ever seen in my lifetime. It might be number one. And I'll be honest, this week has legitimately been one of the craziest weeks of my entire life. In the midst of living through the most destructive wildfire in the history of Los Angeles and being able to witness all the devastation from my apartment and having to deal with all the emotions of that while still going to work. And then after last night, I don't even know what to say other than I'm so grateful for this Notre Dame team to provide some relief amidst everything that has been going on. And normally I don't do episodes on Friday evenings, but I just got done rewatching the game and there was so much more that I want to talk about. And I was just like, let's just get to the desk and start going because I'm still riding an emotional high from the win last night. I don't even have that much written down, to be honest with you. So I'm going to be shooting from the hip a lot today, but I want to go over all the different factors that led to Notre Dame getting this win, plus what it means for the program, because I think this game, this win, is going to have long-lasting implications that are going to continue to benefit for the years to come. But I want to start with the true difference in this game, and it's really just one word: resilient. Notre Dame was the more resilient team, and that's why they won the game. The definition of resilient: able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. And this was as difficult as it has been all year for the Notre Dame football team. During the first half, that was not a whole lot of fun. And look, I'm the guy who went out and said, I think Notre Dame is going to have to come back. I thought Penn State would come out a little bit more fresh and that they would be the aggressor off the top because they had more time to rest and because they had played a pretty cupcake schedule in the college football playoff, beating SMU, beating Boise State. Those weren't super taxing wins. Meanwhile, Notre Dame has dealt with a litany of injuries all season that continued in the Orange Bowl. We'll get to that. But they also had to play Georgia, the SEC champion, the top program in college football, in a very physical, heavyweight bout, really, for 60 minutes. And then they had to turn around and play another football game just 1 week later against a very talented Penn State team. So during the first half, as Penn State got out to a 10-0 lead, I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is kind of what I said would happen, but I did not feel very good in that moment, especially once Riley Leonard went down with an injury right before the end of the first half. I'm looking at the television. I'm thinking, man, like, this might be it. I wasn't quitting on the team. I didn't think it was over by any stretch, but it was the first time where I was like, man, this run might be coming to an end. But insert Steve Angeli, the backup quarterback, peanut butter and jelly time, comes in, leads the team right down the field, converts on 2 third downs on that drive. The first one to Jordan Faison, and then later on to Mitchell Evans to set up a field goal, which was a huge, huge turning point in the game. Notre Dame was only down 10. It felt like they were down 20 because Penn State had their chance to score a touchdown earlier, but Drew Aller missed an easy throw to Nicholas Singleton that should have been a touchdown. Instead, it was dropped. Penn State James Franklin decided to kick a very conservative field goal. So Notre Dame was only down 10. They go down the field. They set up a field goal for Mitch Jeter. He knocks it in. And Notre Dame goes into halftime only down 10-3. But we don't know the status of Riley Leonard. And up to that point, Jeremiah Love had been a non-factor. I didn't think he would do anything in the second half because he barely did anything in the first half. And he's still dealing with that right knee injury. Had a big brace on and everything. So things were not looking great for the Irish. Then the second half starts. Riley Leonard comes in. I'm thinking, all right, let's see what he can do. And Notre Dame marches right down the field, and they score a touchdown, courtesy of Riley Leonard. And all of a sudden, it's tied 10-10. That touchdown felt like it was worth 17 points because the deficit did not feel like it was only a touchdown based on how Penn State had outplayed Notre Dame in the first half. And they did. They were gashing Notre Dame on the ground. Notre Dame's defense was reeling. Their offense had nothing going. And then all of a sudden, it's tied at 10 with just over 12 minutes to go in the third quarter. It's a whole new ball game. And all the momentum started to shift in favor of Notre Dame. It's a funny thing how football works. But it was Notre Dame coming through in the middle eight yet again. Going into that game, they had outscored opponents 145-10 in the middle eight. The last 4 minutes of the second quarter and the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. Well, in this game, they outscored Penn State 10-0 in the middle eight, and that is what brought them back into the game. They were down. Things were not going well for them, but they were the more resilient team, and that showed. Steve Angeli has not really been able to play much at all this year. He would have been the starter if Notre Dame did not go in the transfer portal and get Riley Leonard. What does he do? He doesn't whine. He doesn't mope. He comes in when the team desperately needed him, goes right down the field and sets that up. That is resiliency on full display. He went 6 for 7, 44 yards. Could not be happier for Steve Angeli to have his moment and then take advantage of it because a lot of times backups get their moment and they aren't able to do that. Steve Angeli did that. So now Notre Dame is tied 10-10. Momentum is in their favor. And there was a big moment when the score was tied. Because it wasn't like Notre Dame just immediately put their foot on the gas and then got out to a 17-10 lead right away. Notre Dame punted the ball. Luke Talek absolutely annihilated the Penn State return man. And I think that set the tone. Because, yeah, Notre Dame had come back and the game was tied. But when he laid that hit, you could hear the crowd, the Notre Dame faithful that were out there. They were a little bit outnumbered, I believe. But, man, did they get loud in that moment. And I think Penn State had a real moment of awakening where they were like, oh, man, these boys came to play in this half. Then Notre Dame gets the ball. They go down the field, and then Jeremiah Love, who is probably 70%, who knows, who cares? He only finished with 11 carries for 45 yards, but he did have a touchdown run, and that was one of the most impressive 3-yard runs you are ever going to see in your life. He threw off 4 Penn State defenders. He was stuffed as soon as he got the ball, and he just kept going and kept going and kept going, and somehow got the ball into the end zone. And he let out like this primal yell after he did it. He even said after the game, he didn't even think about throwing up the love sign because he needed to express a level of emotion that reflected the play that he just scored on. And it was a dominant play. And that's what he said after the game, and that's exactly what it was. So he puts Notre Dame up 17-10. Notre Dame has all the momentum, but give credit to Penn State. They responded back quickly. They drove right down the field and scored. And now it's 17-17, all tied up. And you're thinking, uh-oh, who has the momentum now? Well, then Penn State immediately scored again after a really bad Riley Leonard interception, which was one of those plays we were thinking, man, is that going to be like the Northern Illinois interception from the beginning of the year? Like, is that going to be what kills this Notre Dame team? Nicholas Singleton ends up scoring on a 7-yard run. That was really set up by a absolutely absurd pass interference call on Adon Schuler. And look, I know that Greg McElroy and the guys on the broadcast said that it was the right call. I just highly disagree. I think Tyler Warren initiated the contact on Adon Schuler, and he did turn his head late. Plus, in college, you can face guard. So they wiped that interception off. Penn State scored, and that was a really low point for this team. They could have just put their heads down and given up because they were kind of getting screwed by the refs. They had a bad mistake on offense, and now with just under 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Penn State had a touchdown lead, and Notre Dame's offense, who had showed some life, had to go all the way down the field, 80 yards to tie the game. And what do they do? Exactly that. They go 7 plays, 81 yards in just 3 minutes and 17 seconds to tie the game at 24 because Jane Greathouse, a guy who really all season long, we've been waiting for him to break out. It really had not happened. And he, at one point in the season, his snap count was diminished, but not in this game. He came through for Notre Dame in a huge way. played 65 snaps, had over 100 receiving yards. It was the first time that a Notre Dame wide receiver had over 100 receiving yards in a game since Jordan Faison in the Sun Bowl of last season. And he set up Notre Dame with a couple huge plays on this drive. He had a couple third downs, and then he just broke two defenders' ankles on his way to a 55-yard touchdown pass, the longest pass of the season for Notre Dame. And now it is tied at 24. And then as the game started to wind down, we're looking at the end of regulation. You're thinking, is this game going to go to overtime? Notre Dame had a chance. They had the ball late with the chance to score either a touchdown or a field goal. They got sacked. They had to give the ball back. But there was a key moment during that last possession, or the second to last possession, when Notre Dame had the ball. Riley Leonard went up the middle and got a first down. There's about a minute 40 left on the clock. The camera panned to the Penn State sideline, and Drew Aller, who had a rough night, to say the least, was visibly distraught. And he hadn't even thrown that game-sealing interception yet. They show him on the sideline. He tilts his head back, and he's like, oh, my God. Like, he just did not have his composure in that moment. He wasn't even on the field. But then he got his chance. They got the ball. They ran it on first down. They got 12 yards, and then Penn State had a couple timeouts. They were thinking, all right, let's try to push this ball downfield. Jalen Snead gets the pressure on Aller. Aller throws the interception. Phenomenal play by Christian Gray. You want to talk about a resilient player. Christian Gray had an interception wiped off earlier in the game because of a holding call. It was the right call, but it hasn't been the best past few games for him. Well, he came up with the biggest play of the season with that interception there. Resiliency. That's the word. He gets the ball. Notre Dame on offense comes out. They put the ball in better field goal position. Again, big pass play to Jaden Greathouse on third down. The stones of Mike Denbrock to call that. And then for Notre Dame to execute it, they set up Mitch Jeter, who has had a really up and down year. This whole second half of the season was terrible for him as he was recovering from the injury. He wasn't right physically. He wasn't right mentally. He couldn't convert a field goal. Then in the playoffs, he's been coming through for the Irish this entire time. He bangs it in, 41-yard field goal through the uprights. Notre Dame goes up 27-24, and that was the game. A bunch of different guys who have not had the best seasons, or there's been some moments where it's been really down, from Riley Leonard to Jaden Greathouse to Jeremiah Love as he's dealing with this injury, from Christian Gray. So many different guys had moments in this game to come through, and they did it when Notre Dame needed it most, and that's why Notre Dame won the game. They were the more resilient team. No matter what was thrown their way, they did not put their heads down. They stayed in the fight. They signed up for 60, and they played every single second of those 60 minutes. And now Notre Dame is headed to the national championship. It's hard to say when you think about what this team has gone through this year, the loss to Northern Illinois, all the injuries that they've had to deal with. It did not matter. This team has a will to win that we have not seen in a really long time, and there is still one game left on the schedule, the biggest game of all, and Notre Dame is right in there with a chance to win a national title. I can't believe it. It's unbelievable. But it wasn't just the players. It was the staff, too. And I believe there was a turning point in this game that happened well before kickoff between Marcus Freeman and James Franklin. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you are missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So the morning of the game, I put out this game day preview show, pregame primer, whatever you want to call it. And I speculated that James Franklin really pissed off Marcus Freeman during their Orange Bowl presser. And most of those times these coaches do these press conferences, it's like a whole lot of nothing, right? They say what they need to say. They're just trying to get out of there as fast as possible because in addition to all the game planning that's necessary for a game like this, they also have way more media obligations and way more things like that that are really outside the realm of football before a game on the biggest stage. But anyone who watched that press conference could see Marcus Freeman and his body language. It looked like a guy who was pissed off, who was offended by the fact that James Franklin basically tried to sun him during that presser. James Franklin was going on about Notre Dame's independence and Marcus Freeman's age and his hairline and all this stuff. And if you probably calculated the amount of words that each coach spoke during that presser, James Franklin beat Marcus Freeman by a mile. But it's what Marcus Freeman didn't say that kind of set the tone. His body language said everything you needed to know. He was pissed off. He did not like the way that James Franklin handled that. And that's part of the James Franklin experience, right? He's a big personality. He's loud. He's vocal. His actions are interesting, to say the least. And there was a real turning point in that moment. And I said in that pregame show, I think Marcus Freeman is pissed, and I think he's going to relay that message to the entire team. But that was all speculation. We don't know. Maybe I just misinterpreted. Well, after the game, Pete Sampson from The Athletic, great friend of the program, talked to a few players on the Notre Dame team, like Xavier Watts, like Jeremiah Love, like Jack Kaiser. And they basically said exactly what I said. Marcus Freeman was pissed off, and he made that clear to the team. They didn't get into the details about what he said or how he responded specifically to James Franklin, but he was not happy, and he let his players know. And the players felt disrespected, specifically by James Franklin. And you could tell they were out there to back their coach, to prove Franklin wrong, to prove all the doubters wrong. And I think that was a seminal moment in the game. It really was. Even though it was well before kickoff, I think that provided Notre Dame with just a little bit more juice in this game. And it took everything from everyone on this team, from the coaching staff on down. That was a tough game. It could have gone either way. But Notre Dame ultimately came through because, one, they're the more resilient team, but they're also the better coach team. And they were the better coach team against Georgia, who has the best coach in college football right now in Kirby Smart. And they have every resource imaginable at Georgia. They have way more coaches, way more analysts, way more people on their support staff at Georgia than Notre Dame. But it doesn't matter because the people in that building, inside the Gook, are the best there is in college football. I can say definitively, this college football playoff run proves that Notre Dame is the best coaching staff in the entire country. I'm not saying that Marcus Freeman is the best head coach, but the coordinators on down, from Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, Marty Biaggi, the special teams coordinator. Those three guys, I think, make up the best coordinator trio in all of college football. And then you've got Dylan McCullough, one of the best running backs coach in college football. You've got Mike Mickens, defensive backs coach. He's amazing. Like, this staff is so incredible. And I think that there is a real sense of symmetry with everyone. Everyone is on the same page at all times. And it starts at the top with Marcus Freeman. The fact that he just turned 39 today is incredible. Talk about a great birthday, huh? Coming off a win like that in the college football playoff semifinal to move on to the national championship. That's a damn good birthday, man. That's about as good as it gets. But for a guy who's only been coaching for 3 years as a head coach, he has developed so much, specifically this season. Like, that Northern Illinois game was bad. And part of that, a big part of that, is on Marcus Freeman. But the way that he has learned from that experience and developed as the season has gone on, not just in the way that he prepares his team, but in the in-game strategy, like, it is just so different. Look at how Notre Dame handled their drive after they got that interception from Christian Gray. There's really no way to prepare for a situation like that. They got the ball with under a minute left. They're already in plus territory, but now they got to get Mitch Jeter in good field goal range. They had some ways to go, but they ran it with Riley Leonard up the middle, so they got some chunk plays. They were in complete control of the clock. They used their timeouts correctly. And then on a critical third down, instead of running the ball, which is exactly what Penn State and pretty much everyone else watching expected them to do, they roll out left and gave Riley Leonard the option. He could run it, or if Jane Greathouse could get open in the soft spot in the zone, hit him for a first down and then some. Riley Leonard makes a great throw, finds Greathouse in a pretty tight window. There were two Penn State defenders right there who could have knocked the ball down, but they didn't. Leonard put it on his chest. Greathouse catches the ball, gets upfield for a few more yards, does not celebrate, immediately hands the ball to the ref so that they can get on the line of scrimmage and burn some more clock or spike the ball if they need to. And all in all, that moment was so huge because then they get Mitch Jeter with a 41-yard field goal instead of a 50-plus one, which could have gone either way. They set him up because of great planning and great strategy by the coaching staff. Whereas you look over on the other side, what did Penn State do when they got the ball? Well, there's just under a minute left, and Greg McElroy is deciding, well, should Penn State be aggressive here? And he's like, yeah, you got to be aggressive. You got Drew Aller. He's got 50-plus touchdowns. You got a chance here. You got a few timeouts to march the ball downfield and set up your field goal kicker. Well, I don't know if they were planning on going for the touchdown or the field goal in that situation because they ran the ball in the first play. But then they got 12 yards, and they're thinking, oh, well, now I guess we have to be aggressive. And then Drew Aller makes a terrible decision down the field. But it's not just on Drew Aller. Like, yeah, that was a bad pass. He shouldn't have thrown it in the middle of the field, especially in the face of pressure in that moment. You cannot throw an interception there, but he did. But also, what's the coaching staff doing? They run the ball in the first play, and then all of a sudden they're trying to pass it downfield. It's like, do you even know what you want to do? Do you have a plan going into that drive or not? And it didn't feel like they had a plan because they ran it first, and now they're trying to throw it downfield. It was almost like, wow, the run actually got 10 yards. Now let's try to throw it downfield. It didn't feel like a team with a real strong plan. And James Franklin has been the coach at Penn State for 11 seasons. That's a guy who's been around there for a long, long time. And it felt like they were just kind of winging it in the most critical moments of the game. But on the other side, Notre Dame had a plan. In a moment where everything was scrambling, you don't expect to be in that situation after the Christian Gray interception, but they were, and they were ready to go, and they just played it perfectly, and they set up that game-winning game-winning field goal by Mitch Sheeter. Like, the way that this coaching staff is operating in-game, they're just on a different level right now, and that was my biggest criticism of Marcus Freeman going into the season. I was like, look, he's great, in front of a microphone. He's great at getting players to join this team, talent acquisition. He's obviously a good coach that people want to work for because he's hired really well. But the in-game stuff, there was a lot of times in the past you're like, why is he using a timeout there? I don't know about this call. Like, why are you burning clock? Like, there's just been simple moments in the past where you're like, this doesn't look like a head coach that's been around there that long. And, he hadn't. He was a very inexperienced head coach. So for him to develop that much from the beginning of the year to now is just a testament to the work ethic of him and this entire staff and the way that they have come together here to make sure that they put this team in the best position possible at every moment in the game. They didn't play their best in the first half. They were getting gashed, and Al Golden's defense looked vulnerable in a way that we haven't seen in a really long time. But it didn't matter because the players stayed in the fight. They were resilient, and the better coaching staff won. And I really think it all goes back to that moment in the press conference when James Franklin disrespected Marcus Freeman in front of everyone who was watching. It wasn't like a super out front, like he's not MFing him or anything like that, right? But it was subliminal. It was subtle. Marcus Freeman took it as a slight, and he's got an edge to him. This is a former middle linebacker. We've seen his edge before the Texas A&M game when they were coming out of the huddle, when he's been yelling at players. He's way more comfortable in his own skin now than he was before. And anyone who's watching that could tell, that guy's pissed. And he's going to make sure that his team knows it, and they were going to play just a little bit harder for him. They play so hard for him. They love him so much already. He is a direct reflection of the entire roster, and they stepped up in a big way for their head coach. And when it came time for the coaching staff to deliver in the game, they did it again. So credit to Freeman, credit to Golden, Denbrock, Biaggi, every single member of that coaching staff. They were the better staff compared to Penn State, and it's a big reason why they won that game. Just a phenomenal job. And this impressive run by Marcus Freeman keeps going. We talked all offseason about how important year 3 was for a Notre Dame head coach, and now he's got this team in the national championship. But before we turn the page to the national championship game, I do want to keep the focus on this game a little bit and what it means for the program, because no matter what happens in the championship game, a win like this is going to have long-lasting benefits well beyond the scope of this season. More on that right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. All right, here's my pick for the weekend. NFL Wildcard Weekend, so many great games to choose from. I'm going with the Steelers plus 9.5 against the Baltimore Ravens. Do I think the Steelers are going to win this game? No. I don't think they have nearly enough offense to win, but I do think they're going to cover because Lamar Jackson has struggled against the Steelers in the past, and in the playoffs, things get especially hard for offenses. I think this game is going to be played in a phone booth, and the Steelers are going to do just enough to cover. We might be holding on to our butts there at the end. It might be a backdoor, but I think the Steelers get it done. They're going to cover that 9.5-point spread. For more, just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here because it is just one game. It's one season. But this playoff run leads me to believe that we're entering a new era of Notre Dame football, an era that we have been waiting for a long time. When Marcus Freeman was hired, the hashtag Freeman era was a big thing on social media. It was fun. It worked, right? And there was a ton of buy-in for Marcus Freeman from the players. That video that went viral when he was announced as the head coach of the entire team, the way that the fan base rallied around him because he's a great guy, he's very charismatic, he's fun to root for, all that stuff, right? Well, the first 2 years didn't go to plan. I think that much is obvious. And this year, it didn't start off great. You know, they had a great win, and then they followed that up with a horribly embarrassing loss. And you're thinking, what is Notre Dame football under Marcus Freeman? Well, then they won one game, and then they won another, and then another, and then another. And then all of a sudden, Notre Dame is playing USC for a chance to make the college football playoff. Well, they win that game. Then they handle Indiana in the first round. And then they beat Georgia, the top program in college football, by 13. And then they play Penn State when it felt like this team was gassed, like they had nothing left. And guys kept going down with injuries. I put it out on Twitter. Like, they were without their starting quarterback, star running back, 3 different guys in the offensive line, best corner, 2 DNs, their NFL defensive tackle. It just didn't matter, right? More guys kept going down. Guys would come in. And guess what? Notre Dame found a way to win that game despite all of that, right? Look, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you've dealt with some pretty brutal losses, right? I know I have. I think back to that Ohio State loss last season and so many more where Notre Dame was right there and then they just found a way to lose it. Like, they could never get on the right end of one of these big games. And then last night, Notre Dame was on the ropes so many times. And it felt like, well, this is where Notre Dame makes that critical mistake. And it felt like that when Riley Leonard threw that interception. We're like, well, there it is. You know, they had their chances. They had the lead there late. And ultimately, they're just going to blow it because they don't win games like this. But that didn't happen. They won. They came back and won. They rallied and they won that game late. They made the plays that other teams have made on them so many times in the past. And against Georgia, where usually in the past when Notre Dame is going up against a team of that caliber, the SEC champion, they get run off the field. But Notre Dame was the aggressor in that game. They won by double digits. And now all this stuff, it feels so different than what we've been used to. And I'm young, right? Relatively speaking. I don't feel young all the time, but I'm 28 years old. And in terms of Notre Dame fandom, it really hasn't been all that great in my lifetime. Like, sure, we've had winning seasons. There's been a couple playoff berths. I mean, 2018, 2020, those were a lot of fun. 2012 was really fun up until the national championship game. But the glory days that I hear about from my dad and my uncle and older Notre Dame fans of Lou Holtz and Dan Devine and Eric Parsegian, like, all that stuff, that never really happened. I've never seen Notre Dame win a national championship. Up until 2 weeks ago, I had never seen them win a major bowl game. And now they won 2 back-to-back. They won the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl, which obviously wasn't possible before the expanded playoff. But I'm now experiencing, and I feel like a lot of other young Notre Dame fans too, are experiencing the stuff that we had heard about in the past, right? And that just feels different, right? Because I love Notre Dame. I've loved Notre Dame since, I was 4 years old. The only thing I wanted to do growing up was go to Notre Dame and play football. Well, the football thing didn't work out. I didn't play for the team, but I talk about them, so I guess that counts for something. But I never really got to experience the glory days or anything like that, those big wins. And now we're all experiencing it together. This has been an unbelievable run. The win over Indiana was fun, even though Indiana was overmatched. Georgia was incredible. Penn State was an instant classic. Notre Dame is doing the thing that they have not done in so long. And there's a ton of credit to go around. But this win is going to mean so much more for a new generation of fans. And these recruits who Notre Dame has been trying to get at the top, like those kids, they don't know about the Notre Dame of old, all the tradition and all that stuff. You know why? Because they just haven't seen it. And if you're not a Notre Dame fan, you're probably not reading up on what Frank Leahy did in the 1940s. The only people who are doing that are the people who grew up in Notre Dame families. Now, Notre Dame is cool. Like, they are. Marcus Freeman is really fun to root for. The team is cool. They have swag. They talk trash. They look good. They play good. They are fun to watch. Sure, the offense might not be the most fun at times, but that defense is flying all over the field. And if you like athletic, physical, violent football, Notre Dame is a team for you. And now these high school recruits and these guys who are playing at other schools who are watching all this happen are like, man, that looks like a fun team to play for. That looks like a fun coach to play for. That looks like an awesome thing to be a part of. And now there's proof that Notre Dame can win in this era of college football. I don't know. In the 14 playoff, it didn't really look like Notre Dame ever had a chance to win it all. because whenever they got to the playoff, they just got smoked. And there were super teams like Clemson and Alabama that would just run all over them in those games. Well, things are different now. I don't want to say definitively that there's not going to be any more super teams anymore in this NIL transfer portal era because the talent is more spread out. I think it's too early to tell there, but there's legitimate parity now, and Notre Dame is in the national championship. So maybe Notre Dame is best equipped to win in the 12-team playoff format, which is not something that a lot of people would have thought. The fact that Notre Dame would have to win 4 games to win a national title, it made it seem almost impossible because in the 4-team format, when they only had to win 2, they never even came close. They never even really sniffed a national title. Well, now they're playing for one. They've already won 3 playoff games. And now they have a ton of resources at their disposal in the NIL department. The university has more of a willingness to bring in transfers than they did before. There is a buy-in from the administration to the athletic department, to the football program. Everyone is aligned with getting Notre Dame back to where they once were. It might never be the level of sustained dominance that we saw back in the late 80s and early 90s and back in the 70s and all of that stuff, but they're going to be in it every year. And the fact that the administration, which I have been a very vocal critic of, is so bought into Marcus Freeman, and Pete Bavacqua, the new athletic director, is doing everything in his power to get this team a national championship. Like, I don't think people understand how big of a Notre Dame football fan Pete Bavacqua was before he got this job and is now. Like, it is so fun to have an athletic director. And I like Jack Swarbrick, but there is a different level with Pete Bavacqua because he cares as much about these games as you and I do. And that guy is leading the athletic department. He's bringing in the finances. He's making sure that this team has all the resources they need to win it all. Everyone is bought in. And now there's proof. There's proof that they can win these games. And even if they come up short, no matter what happens in the national championship game, they have proven that they belong in this stage and that they can win it. So I think you're going to see more NIL money coming in. The boosters are going to be so excited. Like, when was the last time there's been this much excitement about Notre Dame football? 1993? I don't even think that's an exaggeration. So you're going to start to see more people support the NIL collectives. You're going to see more players in the transfer portal saying, hold on, what's going on in South Bend, Indiana? People weren't saying that before, I could promise you. And now there's high school recruits that might be in Florida or California or Texas who probably never would have given Notre Dame any consideration. Now they're looking up there and thinking, that looks really damn fun. And they're going to consider Notre Dame in a way that they had not before, all because of this run and specifically the win last night. Because Notre Dame beat Georgia, they knocked off the SEC, but then they were able to bounce back a week later and then knock off a team who made it to the Big Ten championship. The fact that they did that in back-to-back weeks is incredible. And they are the biggest story in college football right now. Everyone is talking about Notre Dame. And as a fan, this is so much fun for me, and I imagine it's so much fun for you. So enjoy it. Appreciate this ride. We've got, 10 days before the national championship. Enjoy every single second. Watch all the YouTube highlights you can. Listen to every Notre Dame podcast, but start with this one, obviously. Watch on YouTube. Soak it all in because this is an unbelievable time to be a Notre Dame fan, and you don't know when it's ever going to be this good again, right? Don't think about the future. Enjoy the present. And this has just been so fun. Like, I know it sounds like corny and cheesy here to close it out, but this has been an unbelievable ride. I've had so much fun talking about this team every single day with you. I've loved the little community that we have built with Locked On Irish. And, just after the game last night, hearing from so many people who are like DMing me and just so happy about things, like, just soak it all in, man, because this is as good as it gets. This is why you root for this team, why you consume all the content, why you go to the games, why you cheer for them throughout the good and the bad. This is the payoff that you deserve. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I am. I'm going to talk about this team a whole lot more over the next couple weeks and obviously beyond that as well. But that's going to do it for this episode. I'm going to be back on Monday of next week. I think Luke Smith is going to be back. We're going to talk a lot more about this game. We're going to continue talking about it throughout next week. We're also going to talk about who they're playing in the national championship. I'm taping this right before Ohio State and Texas kick off. So in just a few hours, we're going to know the matchup. I think it's probably going to be Ohio State. So plenty of storylines about that. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. There's going to be a ton of content coming your way. The best way to never miss an episode is to make sure that you're subscribed wherever you are tuning in from. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, remember, give this video a like. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars and leave a review. It goes such a long way in supporting the show. And I appreciate everyone who's done so already and everyone who does so just now. But have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the ride, and I'll see you on Monday.